The Chicago Bears are back on the practice field for organized team activities, and we're starting to get a better sense of the leaders on both sides of the ball stepping into bigger roles this year.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. On the show today, we touch base with Jaylon Johnson on how he's stepping into a bigger role as a leader on this Bears defense and some of the differences in what Matt Eberflus' defense will be like compared to Sean Desai, Vic Fangio style defense that they're transitioning from. We'll hear from center Lucas Patrick about all the rookie offensive linemen they brought in, and him very clearly establishing himself as like the veteran face of that offensive line, face and voice in the middle of that group. And you'll really get a sense of that, I think, from the words you hear him and the way he talks and the way you see and hear him talk really sort of hammers that home for me. And we have to wrap up with an update on the Tarik Cohen situation, which just unfortunately keeps getting worse. And it's sad and unfortunate for everyone involved. And like I said, our best thoughts kind of go out to Tarik, but we'll kind of check in on how things just got worse for him once again. But let's start with the new Bears defense under Matt Eberflus, switching from a Vic Fangio scheme that's sort of seen at the forefront of, innovation and play calling and keeping up with modern NFL offenses, sort of the counter to a lot of what teams have been able to do, to Matt Eberflus' defense that we've heard players describe as a little bit more simple and easier, not as an insult from their perspective, but just something that they don't have to think as much on the field, perhaps. They can then play a little bit faster and more loose. And as they're sort of getting everybody on the same page here, of course, then you have all the turnover on the defense. Some of your key leaders from the past regime on the fields, on the roster, now gone, and a bunch of young players now even coming into that secondary. And all of a sudden, in the cornerback room especially, Jaylon Johnson is one of the elder statesmen and kind of stepping up into that bigger leadership role and being a little bit more of the face and the voice of at least that part of this Bears defense, of course, along with Eddie Jackson. And he was able to peel the curtain back a little bit about kind of the differences he's seeing thus far this year and how that could sort of take shape on the field.
What are your impressions of the new defense, and how well do you feel that your skill set fits into what they want you to do?
How do I feel? I mean, it's definitely different from what we're used to running here in the past. But, I mean, I feel like it gives us a lot more opportunities to see the quarterback, to make plays on the ball. So, I mean, definitely got to learn the system, learn the communication, learn the verbiage. And I thought that's going to be big, especially for the secondary. So, I mean, we were in the system that we had last year, and we still had some mental errors. So, I mean, I definitely think we need to do some extra studying, just be on one accord better this year, being able to communicate and play the zones a lot better than we did last year.
Kelly, from your position, what are the biggest differences system-wise that this defense has versus the one you were playing in your first 2 years?
A lot more eyes on the quarterback.
At the risk of oversimplifying some of the differences here between Matt Eberflus' defense and Vic Fangio's defense / Sean Desai's defense, I think one of the things he talks about in terms of like more eyes on the quarterback, a lot of times in Fangio's scheme, he liked to go to more of what they call pattern match zone schemes that sometimes and more often can have it be a zone coverage, but have especially your outside cornerbacks playing what ends up functioning more like man-to-man coverage in how they're and what technique they're using to cover receivers, that they will pass off routes like a zone, but then will sometimes play players like man. And that's why it's seen as innovative and effective, of course. That's part of the big effectiveness, but also that sort of response to the innovations of offense, in the sense that the defense will change sort of how they play certain routes based on the routes concepts. The difference of based on what the receiver does, that will change what the defender does in terms of his responsibility on that play. So then it's hard for quarterbacks to read and decipher the coverage as quickly, because the players won't treat every single play in that play call exactly the same way. Whereas it seems to be, based on what we're hearing, that Eberflus is emphasizing maybe a more traditional style of zone defense where everyone is sort of dropping back and keeping eyes on the quarterback and passing off routes and playing it a little bit more straight up and a little bit more, I guess, not simplistically, but just more simply and more straightforwardly and more plainly. And there are advantages to that and disadvantages to that compared to what we're seeing from the Vic Fangio styles of defense. But it could be an opportunity for guys like Jaylon Johnson and Kyler Gordon to play with a little bit more eyes facing the quarterback, like you said. I don't think it makes a big difference for a player like the safety positions and the linebackers as much, because I think in both systems, especially the safeties, are going to be playing eyes on quarterback zones either way. But it's more, I think, the underneath defenders that will have more eyes on quarterbacks, and maybe that means more turnovers or more opportunities for turnovers, but maybe it also means a little bit easier time for opposing quarterbacks to read the defense. Of course, like, Scheme is one thing, and you can talk about scheme till you're blue in the face. It does also matter, just like how good are your players against their players, how good is the Bears secondary against the opposing receivers and the opposing quarterbacks. There's a human element, a player element, in addition to a scheme element here as well, that can't all just be boiled down to routes and zones on paper. But we get at least a little bit of a sense there from Jaylon Johnson here, like stepping into this bigger, more prominent role as cornerback one, and he's going to have two rookies starting with him in the secondary alongside with Eddie Jackson and probably a veteran in Tavon Young in the slot. But it's Jaylon Johnson's secondary at this point. He certainly still has to prove himself to this new regime, but it seems like that's what's being set up for him right now. Well, on the other side of the ball, we know it's Justin Fields' offense, yes, for sure. But on the offensive line, Lucas Patrick, the free agent from the Green Bay Packers, has come in as the very clearly established now leader of this Bears offensive line, despite, the presence of at least Cody Whitehair has been there for a while, and you'd think maybe is sort of the elder statesman there. But no, this is Lucas Patrick's offensive line, and we'll hear from him and really get a sense of like his style and that leadership, and I think you'll find him very, very easy to root for, despite being a former Packer. Next on Locked On Bears. Our friends at Built Bar have unveiled the birthday cake Built Puff, and boy, is it delicious. There's a reason why we say they make the world's best tasting protein bars, because they taste so good. They don't taste like regular protein bars. The birthday cake puff, it's kind of like dipping your finger into a jar of birthday cake frosting, but then you realize it's only 150 calories, and it's loaded up with 16 grams of protein. Every flavor of Built Bar or Built Puffs, any of those protein bar products, are low sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. They're soft, they're easy to chew, they're delicious. The birthday cake Built Puffs, first of all, have sprinkles in the outside, which are delicious. I love sprinkles. Second of all the Built Puffs to me taste like they're covered, it's a marshmallow in the middle with the chocolate covering on the outside, or in this case, more like the frosting type covering on the birthday cake Built Puffs. I'm telling you, they are delicious. I've been eating one every single day. It's more like a dessert for me that I don't have to feel guilty about, and can get that extra protein to help me feel more full and also satisfy that sweet tooth. You got to try them for yourself. Head on over to built.com. Use our promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. It seems rare, or maybe just special, when a player can come into a new team and a new organization and quickly immerse himself and take over as a real leader that players can get behind despite only slightly knowing him, right? Being a relatively sort of quick addition to that group, right? You'd think in locker rooms, right, there's sort of an established hierarchy at times where it's like, yeah, for example, Cody Whitehair's been here since 2016. He's one of the longest tenured Bears at any position at this stage. But I think a couple of other factors make Lucas Patrick, or put Lucas Patrick here in a good position to step in and be a strong leader. One, I think naturally he does have leadership qualities that you'll, I think, hear pretty clearly for yourself in just a moment here. Two, you have an offensive line group that is going through some major turnover as is, and is already a very young group, right? Outside of Cody Whitehair, it's two guys who were rookies last season, and then Sam Mustipher and a bunch of backups. So, like, it was also a position other than Cody Whitehair that didn't have a large contingent of established veteran leadership. And then maybe the other and biggest factor of all of them with this is Lucas Patrick knowing Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, having familiarity with the offensive system and being able to help the offensive linemen and the quarterbacks adjust to that system. But most importantly now, I think you're seeing him take that role and kind of run with it. And that's going to be really valuable for the rookies and all the new offensive linemen they brought in, but especially the 2 second-year players and the 4 draft picks and the undrafted free agents that they signed. And I think Lucas Patrick has a great attitude about it as well and sees having all those young guys in on the offensive line around him as also a really good thing for him.
What do you want to see in that group over the next month plus to feel like it's in the right direction headed to camp?
Every day, get better and compete and get tough. So fired up that our GM is a former offensive lineman because I think he gets it to the core what it takes to build an offensive line, and it's tough competition, smart, just like guys who love football and like just want to compete. And I think it's great. I mean, bring 30 guys in. Like, we can only have 5, and it's only going to push guys further. It's going to push me further. I'm going to push other guys further. I can't think of a better scenario, even for me as a veteran, having so many young guys that, they see different things or they're asking me questions. And I got to be even more on top of my game and what I know mentally, because I know they're going to ask a ton of questions, and I have to be right. So it all around, there's a ton of great things.
He expressed a couple months ago his confidence in you as a tone setter. I'm curious if you could describe for us what that means to you, just to be able to instill the edge in that group up there.
Yeah, I mean, football's played a certain way. It's not a contact sport; it's a collision sport, and we as the offensive line have 2 duties on whether it's a run or pass. If it's a run, we're denting the defense. If it's a pass, we're setting a wall, and like that's the expectation that every man should have when they put on a Chicago Bears helmet as an offensive lineman.
The way Lucas Patrick talks and just not only like how he carries himself, but also his mentality there, his philosophy there, sounds like exactly what you want leading your offensive line and setting the example for 2 prominent second-year players and 4 rookie draft picks, right? All of that sounds very ideal and gives you a good sense as to why this new regime was so excited about signing Lucas Patrick and why there was a certain energy about him, like, yeah, he's going to come in and be the center. And specifically it being the center position, the one that makes the calls on the offensive line and sort of has to balance both sides and be, open and head on a swivel and setting the protections and so many different things from that position in particular. You can have leaders be at the other offensive line spots, but you need that type of solidity from the center spot. That's not to say that Lucas Patrick is going to come in and play like a Pro Bowler. No, I mean, there is a reason he's been pretty much a career backup, a very good option off of the bench for Green Bay in recent years and has played well in those opportunities. But it's not as though the Bears are for sure, and he's played guard in some other positions too. He's got great versatility. But so like, I'm just saying, let's not get carried away that all of a sudden Lucas Patrick is going to be this all pro offensive lineman. He should be very good, should be consistent enough for them, and should be everything you're looking for from that leadership position. I mean, it's just, you want to go play for the guy, right? When he talks about, no, this is a collision sport, and every single offensive lineman needs to feel that internally and carry that for themselves when they put on the Chicago Bears helmet, right? He even is like taking like an ownership or like a representation of like the team and like belonging to this team, right? It's like when you hear that guy talk, you wouldn't think, just if you didn't know nothing else about Lucas Patrick, that he was an offensive lineman and he was a center for the Bears, and you heard those quotes, you wouldn't think that he had just spent the last 5 years of his whole career here playing for the division rival, the hated division rival that has dominated the rivalry on one side. Like, he sounded like a through and through like Bears guy all of a sudden very, very quickly. And I think it says a lot about him, how quickly he's been able to not only adapt that, but then also really take to this leadership role for these young offensive linemen. Not that he's going to be the secret to unlocking all of them and making them great players themselves, but I think it's a really great situation for those players to come in from a leadership standpoint that can establish some sort of initial solid foundation of setting the right example and showing the rest of the line how it's supposed to be done and how they can be really sort of some of the leaders of the offense as a whole and set that tone up front that can reverberate to everyone else. Certainly helps that your general manager is also a former offensive lineman. That was another part of what Lucas Patrick had talked about there. So I think there's a lot of reason to be encouraged about at least the hands in which are leading this offensive line. Still would like a little bit more talent added to that position, although they did sign Sean Coleman as a free agent. We'll have to break that down here a little bit later on this week. He has starting experience at offensive tackle. All of a sudden, more competition for Larry Borum / Tevin Jenkins, depending on how they want to move everyone around there. So we'll have more to get to there. But we still today need to get to another sort of tough story, a follow-up to the Tarik Cohen story we talked about last week on the podcast, because it's been a rough couple of years for Tarik Cohen, and the bad news just keeps coming, and it's sad, and it's important. It's a player that we're all rooting for and need to check in on. So we'll touch base on sort of the latest really tragedy befalling Tarik Cohen next on Locked On Bears. Our friends at betonline.net are going to be the number one source for all of your sports betting needs and information all off season long, into the regular season, the postseason, for any sport. Like, yes, it's May and you can still bet on football. BetOnline.net's going to have all the stuff you need for futures bets on Bears win total over under 7. Bears odds to make the playoffs are pretty much a long shot there. Same with odds on the NFC North, where they'll finish. In the NFC North, odds are favoring like 3rd and 4th place there. Plus futures on, league-wide stuff. MVP, offensive, defensive player of the year, coach of the year, rookie of the year, and so much more. Then you've got basketball playoffs getting down to the final 4 teams now. Hockey playoffs getting into the second round. Major League Baseball season well underway. You've got boxing and MMA fights and so much more. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information. Head over to their website today or use your mobile device to learn about the trends and action you need to know. BetOnline, where the game starts. You got to just feel for Tarik Cohen and how much he has gone through in the last 2+ years now. And as it turns out, it's probably going to be another year of going through it again for Cohen. So last week on the podcast, we talked about a story Cohen had put in the Players Tribune. It's sort of, written by him, but I mean, the secret of the Players Tribune is that there's kind of a ghostwriter. There's ghostwriters that sort of write it for the player, but with the player. But they sort of edit it and clean up and put it in a nicer presentation, perhaps, than if the players were just left to do that. Regardless, not the point. Cohen had a piece in the Players Tribune, the letter to his younger self, sort of explaining to his younger self in the first person, saying I guess sort of in the first and second person, that hey, you're going to deal with this. Your brother is going to get shot in the head. Your other brother is going to be electrocuted and die. Your brother is going to be arrested. He's going to be selling drugs. Tarik Cohen talked about how he himself, when he bailed his brother out, flushed a bunch of drugs down the toilet and, all the guilt he's felt about maybe wishing he should have spent more time there or sent more money home or all these different things, feeling like what could he have done to be a better brother and a better family man. And then, of course, gets injured and, tears not only his ACL like we thought, but also said he tore his MCL. And there was some other medical thing in there about I don't know if that's a tibia or a fibia or a scapula, or I don't know my anatomy well at all, but there was an additional damage in the knee besides just a regular ACL tear, which is already extremely difficult to recover from by itself. And so there was all this stuff about, all this reason to root for Tarik Cohen, to support Tarik Cohen, even though he's not a Chicago Bear anymore. And it was like, he said in the piece, he finally feels like he's getting his speed back, he's getting confidence back, he's been cutting, he's been training, and he feels like he's getting ready to go. And then yesterday, Tuesday, Tarik Cohen went live on Instagram Live, showing him doing some workouts, not like pumping iron at the gym. I didn't watch the live stream all that long, but like just him running, him cutting, him doing footwork drills, right? Just sort of put his phone on Instagram Live and put it down to sort of show people like, hey, my foot speed's back, my regular speed is back. I'm running. Look at how good my workout looks. If anything, it's him regaining some confidence back. It's almost sort of showing off like, hey, see, I'm still Tarik Cohen. Human Joystick is back, or Chicken Salad, all the different nicknames we had for Tarik Cohen. How fun it was to watch him move, and you can see him like doing the little mini hurdles, and then like doing the footwork and sort of doing the quick feet around, and then like running backwards and stuff. And then one of the little foot things he's doing, all of a sudden he pulls up, grabs at his ankle, and goes down to the ground. It was just like a really quick like one wrong step, and immediately like reacts, right? Physical reaction, goes down to the ground. You can hear him say like, I don't know if it's not like a sort of a moan. It's not like a, in massive, not in like, desperate pain moan, but like clearly like an kind of like a somewhere between a yell and a moan of pain, holding that ankle, and tell somebody like, hey, go get my phone, turn off the Instagram Live right now as they check me out. And so that was what we were left with initially on Tuesday. And, the Twitter doctors all came out and said, that kind of looks like maybe an Achilles tear, but I often find it a little reckless for even qualified medical professionals to watch a video of a player, especially an iPhone Instagram Live video from the ground of a player getting hurt, and immediately speculating within minutes what type of a medical diagnosis that could be. But however, in this case, that was correct, unfortunately. And I think it was, I don't know who had it first, it was Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter, but they both tweeted out essentially the same thing at right around the same time, that Tarik Cohen tore his Achilles while working out today. He did officially have, according to Ian Rappaport, an MRI. And so however close Tarik Cohen was to signing with a team, getting to OTAs with a team, maybe training camp, whenever he might come back, that's all gone. And yes, I guess the knee recovery can still continue, but an Achilles injury is, I'm not going to say worse than what Tarik Cohen was dealing with, because he had the combination ACL, MCL, and whatever the third thing was. But if you compare an ACL tear versus a plain ACL tear versus an Achilles tear, usually we think of the Achilles tear as being more difficult to recover from and taking longer in recovery. I think of that. Again, I'm not a medical person at all, and I'm terrible at anatomy, but I think of that as more like a full year type of recovery compared to the traditional ACL. Seems more like an 8 or 9 month recovery nowadays. So now you're putting Tarik Cohen another year out. He hasn't played since 2020, and even then that was in limited capacity. And 2019 was kind of a down year for him because he, in some part, because he was dealing with all the tragedies in his personal life and his family life that he outlined in that Players Tribune piece. And it just sucks, man. Life's not fair to Tarik Cohen. It makes me so glad that he did get the contract extension from the Bears that he did, that he got at least one time that decent, massive payday, right? Wasn't $100 million or $300 million like Deshaun Watson got, right? But he got some good money and some good guaranteed money on that deal, so he could, take care of his late brother's children, his nieces and nephews that don't have a father anymore. He can financially support them, and he can financially support his mother and himself and his family. He at least got that. So he's not just coming off of a rookie deal where, yes, a rookie deal where he gets a couple $1 million is more money than you or I has and may have in our lifetimes. Yes, but like all the work he's put in and all the damage his body has taken and all those things, like it's not fair what has happened to Tarik Cohen and everything he's gone through. He deserves better. And, you just have to root for him even harder now. Not that that's makes a difference in his life and it doesn't make it any easier for him, but like, God, I worry about his mental health. As difficult as his mental health has probably been going through the personal family stuff and the injury that he's already had, to be this close to getting back on the field and have it all taken away from you again while just doing a light workout, on your own, away from the team, not even with contact in a football game. It's got to be devastating to the psyche. Absolutely. You wonder, he might be wondering about his own career. Like, is he ever going to step on the field ever again? Is this it? What's he going to do with his life? I just can't imagine. And so I'm glad that Tarik Cohen got paid when he did. I'm glad he has that sort of financial backing and support. And I just hope whatever happens from here in life that he's happy, that his life is good and better, whether he ever plays another snap of football ever again. I just hope that he can be happy and content in life. That's what I would want for anybody, for you, for me, for anybody, a football player or not. They're human beings with feelings and with families and with difficult situations that we never know fully about. And God, the mental toll in addition to the physical toll that he's going through, I just can't imagine it. So all the best to Tarik Cohen. He'll never hear this, but all the best to Tarik Cohen. And I hope you as a fan can give him support on social media or whatever. Whatever we can do to support Tarik Cohen and, keep the trolls away from giving him, because there are people that will jump on him like that and call him soft or call him injury prone or whatever. But dude, give the guy a break. Holy moly. I don't know that any NFL player has gone through more in the last 2 years, physically, mentally, and spiritually than Tarik Cohen. So that's, again, a little more of a somber way for the podcast, but I hope we can sort of remember the humans in this and send him all the best. You can be sure we'll be keeping a close eye on Bears OTAs and the players still on the team. Hopefully no other injury type situations to have to go through. We'll stick with former Bears and their injuries for now and keep the current Bears, fingers crossed, knock on wood, all your superstition to keep them healthy as well. Whatever happens, you can be sure we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. Been in and out a little bit the last couple of weeks dealing with my own difficult things in my own family life, but I appreciate you tuning in, coming back each and every day. We'll be here for you as much as we possibly can, and hopefully each and every time making it that much easier for you to bear down.